Um, so we can get started. This session is all about academic planning, course selection, and dual enrollment. So all of these things kind of go hand in hand. So we're going to walk through what each of them means, what to look for, different pathways that you might be choosing, and that kind of a thing. Um, that is our topic. And just as a little introduction, so I am Coach Kristin, and I kind of just took the description about me from our website and put it in here. I won't go through everything, but I am a first generation college student. Really discovered my passion for higher education, continuous learning when I was in college myself. I switched majors a lot of times and ended up getting a bachelor's degree and then coming back for more for my master's degree. And so I have experience working in parent and family orientation, women and gender equity. I have experience working with students with foster care experience, student organizations, belonging, fraternity and sorority life. So a lot of different things. But all of that to say, I love working with students. I love the concept of higher education and, like I said, continuous learning. So I am very excited to be here with you and to kind of talk through what course planning looks like. Our agenda for today. So we're going to cover a few different things. Um, the first thing is going to be the big picture. So kind of how academic planning and academics really fit into the college application process and the admissions process. We're going to cover rigor. So rigor is a huge part of academic selection and kind of standing out in the admissions process. Dual enrollment, and I put that one separately from the other options for rigor just because there are a lot of nuances with it that I wanted to kind of talk through. Different pathways. So talking about interests in different majors and how those pathways are different from other majors. We're going to cover context. Um, Whenever I'm working with a student to kind of make classroom recommendations and schedule recommendations, I always like to understand the student's context. I'm happy to just make general recommendations, but I really like to understand some additional information about the student um, before I really make those tailored recommendations, because at the end of the day, student success and well-being are my top priorities. Context matters. And then the last piece we're going to talk about is progression and balance. So kind of what all 4 years look like in the grand scheme of things. We can jump right in to the big picture. And so academics and college admissions, there are three main areas in the academic space that kind of make up academics. So the first piece is going to be GPA and course performance, which I think that's the obvious one that a lot of people think about first. But actually, GPA and course performance is just a small piece of what academics means in the college admission space. So outside of that, we also have positive grade progression and rigor. So I think what a lot of people are assuming going into college admissions, especially for some of the higher tier top 20 Ivy League schools, is that they need to have a perfect transcript, they need to have perfect grades, or else they have no chance. And the college admissions process is done on a holistic basis. So GPA and course performance is just a piece of who you are as an academic person. The other two areas that both have a lot of impact as well are that positive grade progression. So we want to see things go up. So if you get a C in a class, maybe first semester, second semester, we want to see improvement. Maybe you don't have a super great freshman year. We want to see improvement in sophomore year. So having that improvement, being able to see that a student is improving over time is going to be really, really important in the grand scheme of the academic narrative. The last piece is rigor. And so rigor is one that I want to kind of get into a little bit more because that is a big part of um, recommendations and being competitive within the admission space. So um, that is why I want to go over rigor in a little bit more detail, just so that everybody kind of understands what that looks like. And there's a question in the chat, where can you get the recording? This should be posted on our YouTube, I do believe. So it'll be posted there usually within 48 to 72 hours of the training being hosted. So that is where to look. Um, so what is rigor? So there are a few different things that count as rigor in terms of your schedule. And honors courses are often a first foundational step to becoming ready for advanced placement. And so some schools count honors courses on a 5-point scale rather than a 4-point, some do not. So it kind of just depends on how your school classifies that. But honors courses are kind of that in between. So it's not necessarily a regular level class, but it's also not an AP level class. The next step, depending on the system that your school uses, most schools that, not most, many schools use the advanced placement system, so the AP classes. There are also a lot of schools who use the IB system. So in terms of course rigor, advanced placement classes and IB classes are pretty equal when it comes to rigor. They are kind of a step above your regular classes and a step above those foundational honors classes. The other kind of piece to the puzzle here is dual enrollment. And so all three of these categories are really seen very similarly in terms of rigor. And the reason is that they are all college level classes that are kind of preparing you for um, the college space. So advanced placement classes, IB classes, and dual enrollment classes all have the potential to give you college credit as long as you perform well and the institution that you end up going to has the transfer policy in place where it can transfer over. So these three areas seen as very equivalent in terms of rigor. And then down here, I put a little note. Some schools have policies about what students are and are not allowed to take in a given year. And that will be taken into consideration during the admissions process. So I've seen some schools not allow students to take AP classes until their junior year. I have seen some schools limit the number of AP classes students are allowed to take in a given year. And so that will all be taken into consideration during the admissions process so that you are not put up against students who have different opportunities than you. So in terms of taking rigorous classes, it's all about what is available to you and how well you take advantage of those opportunities. So looks like we've got a couple questions in the chat here. And we will also have a Q&A section at the end. So if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them then. But first question here, will you talk about dual enrollment for schools that have limitations, such as the school only allows to take classes at community college? Yes, so I have a slide that's totally dedicated to the different answers that your counselors might give you based on whether or not you're allowed to take dual enrollment classes. Another question, do you recommend to do dual enrollment from community college or UC Scout? Which one counts for GPA? So kind of going back to what I mentioned in the beginning, GPA is not the most important factor. So when we're talking about adding rigor, having it contribute to your GPA or not doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But it kind of depends on what your school's policy is about what appears on your transcript and what doesn't. So some schools will, and we'll go over this on the slide for dual enrollment as well, but some schools will have courses from outside institutions such as community colleges, UC Scout, things like that. Some schools won't allow that to be on the transcript. So it kind of just depends on your individual school policies on whether or not it counts for your GPA. And when it comes to specific courses, there are some courses that totally fine to take at the CC level, but there are other courses like physical sciences, for example, AP Chemistry, AP Bio, things like that, that I would recommend taking through UC Scout if you can't take them at your school. The reason being is that physical science classes at the CC level often have a prerequisite course that you have to take, and they also have a physical lab. So having that prerequisite course and having to go to the campus for that physical lab kind of defeats the purpose of trying to get ahead in your progression, um, if you have to add in all these extra steps. So for classes like physical sciences, if you're wanting to get ahead in that way, definitely would recommend UC Scout or an online high school. Other things, it kind of just depends on your preferences. So UC Scout is an online high school program where you can take classes to kind of supplement those for your high school. It's a program that's run out of California. It's in affiliation with the UC system. But there are other online high schools out there that are great options as well. So I am going to move on. I know that there's a lot of questions. Hopefully, we will cover all of them, but there is time set aside at the end for the question and answer portion, so just hang tight. Okay, so and I don't think it's fair to talk about AP and IB classes without talking about the impact of the AP and IB tests. So the AP and IB tests is what students take after an AP or an IB class is over to ensure that they learn the material well enough to get college credit. So the AB and IB tests are basically what standardize the AB and IB classes to make sure that students have learned enough to get credit for the class at a college level. So, like I said, just kind of a standardization to make sure that everything is good across the board. Um, a lot of people think that if they self-study and take the class and self-study and take the test and do well, it's the same as taking the class. And that is not true. So, without the class itself, the test just determines college credit. Taking the class is what actually adds rigor to your schedule and really is a benefit on your transcript. Self-study does not equal the class appearing on your transcript, so self-study doesn't really add anything in the way of rigor to your schedule. And the test itself will just add potential college credit at the end. So I don't recommend taking an AP test without taking the AP class, unless you are purely looking for college credit out of that test. Um, in that sense, many schools accept a 3 or more for college credit, but top 20 schools and Ivies will often require a 4 or better. So it kind of just depends on where you're applying to, but those are some things to keep in mind. Bottom line here, take the class, always take the class. If you take the class, take the test. You're not mandated to send all of your AP or IB test scores. You can pick the ones that you want to send to specific institutions. But my philosophy is the class is the most important part. And if you put the effort in to take a class, why wouldn't you also try to take the test and see if you can get credit for that class later? So that's kind of my general philosophy on AP and IB tests. The next piece is all about dual enrollment. So here, my first question for students whenever I'm recommending dual enrollment or classes outside of their high school is to check their school's policy. So this is something that you need to talk to your high school counselor about because every school has a different policy. Every school is a little bit more nuanced on what they will allow and on what they will sign off on. So here are some responses that you may get. So your counselor may say that they'll sign off on a student taking dual enrollment courses at a CC, but it won't go on your high school transcript. That's okay. It doesn't need to be on your high school transcript. We would just send the transcripts directly from the college. Another option that I've seen is that they will sign off and the classes will go on your high school transcript. Totally fine. Just kind of another way of publishing those results. This case, we would also send the official transcript from the college, even though it appears on your high school transcript. It's important to have the actual grade-giving institution represented in the transcripts. So even if the classes do appear on high school transcripts, we still like to send them directly from the school just for consistency. Another response is that they will sign off and some classes will go on high school transcript and some won't. Again, this is absolutely fine. Um, just kind of depends on your school's policy. Again, they don't need to be on your high school transcript in order for them to count toward your rigor. So just wanting to make sure that that gets across. Some schools will sign off as long as the student isn't taking classes already offered at the high school. So some schools will allow students to do dual enrollment, but they won't allow them to take classes that are already offered at the school. So if you are looking to take a psychology course, for example, at the CC, but your school offers AP psychology, that might be something that they won't sign off on. So important to talk to your counselor about that. Some schools will sign off, but community college classes are not allowed to be used to advance in subjects like math. So, um, a lot of you are familiar with kind of the math progression. So you've got pre-calc, calc AB, calc BC, and then kind of on from there. Um, and in order to kind of get up to the level of math that we want for specific majors, sometimes students will have to take class over the summer from a CC or something like that to help advance. Some schools will not allow students to use courses from outside institutions to advance in the math pathway. So, something to keep in mind. There are ways around this, but um, then it kind of gets into how much work we want to do to really get around that loophole. It could be taking classes only from the CC in math and taking kind of math classes to just fulfill the requirements at your school. But there could be a lot of things. So there's that. And then there are some schools that won't sign off at all. And that kind of goes back to your school's policies and kind of how those are taken into account in the admissions process. So when a college admissions officer is reading your application, they will have your school's context, they'll have your school's policies, so they will be in the know about these things. So if your school won't sign off at all on community college classes, on things like that, there's really not much we can do. Other than trying to take classes from an online high school that does not require a counselor's signature. So there are still options, but there's just not as many. So like I said, we can still look into options from UC Scout or Silicon Valley High School or Apex Learning or things like that, because those don't require counselor approval. But if your school won't approve community college courses, that's just something that we have to work with. Really no way around school policies. That is we have to follow those. So um, options for taking community college courses, if your school does allow it. I think summer is a great time to either get ahead in subjects like math, if your school allows it, to take classes that add general rigor to your schedule, or to take classes that both add rigor and allow you to explore your interests. My recommendation, if it's your first kind of foray into the community college system, behavioral sciences and humanities courses will often offer a nice transition into CC classes without being too overwhelming. So it'll give you an idea of what a college class is like, but it won't send you over the edge and kind of plunge you into the deep end without learning how to swim first. And with this, we can also kind of look at those things to tailor to your interests. So if we do select a behavioral sciences route and you potentially want to get into medicine someday, we could look at classes like biological anthropology, or I found an osteological anthropology course while I was looking through one of the course catalogs the other day. So there are things that we can really look at to kind of make the best plan for you based on your interests and based on what you have the bandwidth for. There's also the option, if you feel like your class schedule is manageable with all of your extracurricular activities during the school year, taking CC classes is also an option then. Um, the one thing that I want to say here is make sure you're comfortable with your class schedule, though. And a lot of the time, especially if we're just kind of getting used to something, I'll say, let's wait until the spring to take on a college class. Let's kind of make it through the fall, feel things out, understand how you function. And then if you're still feeling good about it, we'll look at something in the spring. So understanding how you are as a student, how you manage your time and everything like that is really, really important when it comes to potentially adding something else. Okay. Look through the chat here and see. So question, does the Does the student point to the school limitations, or will admissions office know based on what school students attended? So the admissions officers will get a school profile with all of the school policies and things like that ahead of time. But if it's something that the student also wants to mention, they can in the additional information section. So especially if they talk to their counselor and it's not a widely known policy or something along those lines, it's something that the student can kind of point to within the additional information, like, hey, my school wouldn't sign off on taking dual enrollment classes, so that wasn't an option for me, or something like that, just to add that additional level of context. Does the UC GPA recalculation include CC classes? So UC GPA is one of those complicated things where there are a lot of nuances, and there's actually a resource that we have about how to calculate the UC GPA and what all goes into it, but it's not one of those things that I really want you to worry about because it's really not that important. Um, the UC's GPA is just a small part of the academic profile, and the UCs are really looking for um, that rigor, that positive course progression, and things like that. Because if you think about it, GPA is not really a differentiating item in the grand scheme of things. Most students nowadays do well. Most students have a pretty decent GPA, but it's not a differentiating factor. And so when we're thinking about how to differentiate yourself academically, it's about taking on challenges, it's about creating a narrative with your classes, it's about really pointing to the things that you're interested in order to communicate that through your academic profile. So if you're interested in learning how to calculate the UC GPA and what goes into it, we can absolutely send you that resource. Just feel free to send us a message and we can get that out to you. For AP and IB courses and when students can take them, so that's up to the student's school. So like I said in the beginning, there are some schools that will limit students to only taking AB and IB classes during their junior and senior year. There are some schools who will limit the number that students can take. And there are also limits of which AP and IB courses are available at some schools. So that would be something to kind of look at your school's policies and figure out. And then if there is an AP class that you want to take that's not available at your school, UC Scout or another online high school might be a good option for you. Um, So, and I think I said this earlier, but just to reiterate, students do not need school permission for online high school classes in the same way as dual enrollment. The only time when they would need school permission or school approval is if they were using those classes outside of the school to fulfill a graduation requirement or something along those lines. So if you're just adding on the class for additional rigor for an additional class to take, then you don't need the same level of approval. Would you recommend a rising 10th grader to take UC Scout over the summer to show rigor? It depends. So it could be a really great option. I would ask you about the classes that you were looking at taking. I would ask you about what your school's policy was regarding dual enrollment classes. So there are a lot of nuances that go into it, but in any case, over the summer, I recommend taking 1 to 2 classes. Number one, to keep in the habit of academics, and number two, to have that extra rigor over the summer and to try to advance if possible. So 1 to 2 classes over the summer, depending on your bandwidth, is usually a safe bet. Um, this school has limitations, no more than 1 college class per semester, but school is on semester. Community colleges are on quarter system. Um, so this would be something to work with your school counselor about. Um, you have to, unfortunately, you have to have your school's approval in order to take community college classes if you are enrolled. Since the student is under the age of 18, they have to have that approval to apply for a college level course. This person is interested in doing computer engineering or data science, 11th going into 12th. School doesn't offer AP computer science related courses, but they do offer AP Chem and AP Bio. So actually, we're going to do a couple pathway exercises toward the end of the presentation, and computer science and engineering is one of those. So we will go through that and kind of what there are options wise. Um, and then it looks like there are quite a few questions. I want to make sure that we get through everything, so I will kind of hold off until we get to the end for the designated Q&A portion. Um, and I kind of said this a little bit earlier, but at the end of the day, it's about what's available to you and how much you're taking advantage of those opportunities. So you are not going to be compared to somebody who, so say that your school is one of those schools that only allows you to take one or two AP classes per year. You are not going to be apples to apples compared to somebody whose school allows them to take as many as they want, because that's just not an even playing field. So kind of, like I said, taking advantage of opportunities that are made available to you in the best way possible. Now we will kind of get into those pathways that I alluded to. So these are the different majors that you can pick and kind of the recommended classes, the recommended things to think about as you are pursuing those. So again, first thing you want to do is check your school's policy on dual enrollment and outside classes and everything like that, just to be sure that what you're doing is allowed, I guess is the best word. So some pretty common pathways that we see a lot of the time are engineering, computer science. Other STEM majors, a lot of the time people are pursuing a STEM related major to go into medicine or something like that. Um, Business and humanities. So the first one that we will start with is engineering and computer science. So this is currently the most impacted pathway out there. So that means that there are a lot of people who want to get into computer science and engineering, but there are not enough spots in the programs, especially at the more prestigious schools, that your top 20s and your Ivy Leagues. It is very difficult to get in there because, like I said, there's a lot of people vying for a limited number of spots. So one of the most important pieces about engineering and computer science is advancement in math. So advancement in math is a must here, and preferably we like to see at least multivariable calculus level by your senior year. And of course, whether or not you're able to do this is kind of dependent on what your school's policies are surrounding dual enrollment, surrounding taking classes outside the school, and things like that. But if at all possible, advancement to at least multivariable calculus is necessary. And just a statistic for you, kind of anecdotally here. So I believe it was Harvard, where it was either Harvard or Stanford, one of them. 95% of the admitted class, regardless of major, had taken math up to a multivariable calculus level. So just something to keep in mind. Math is one of those subjects that's pretty universally rigorous, and it communicates to college admissions officers that you are prepared to take on the challenge, that you are prepared to be successful in high-level classes like this. So again, just a little bit of an anecdote there. Um, but for engineering, computer science, getting as far as you can in math is going to be huge. Huge in differentiating you from the other applicants and really showing that you're prepared to take on the challenges of computer science and engineering. The next piece is advancement in sciences. So when I say sciences here, I'm really talking about AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, and AP Physics C. And obviously, taking that many science courses is going to be very difficult within 4 years of high school. But with an engineering and computer science major, physics is going to become increasingly important. So having that AP Physics C by your senior year is going to be important. And AP Chem is also an important class to have in there because it is seen as one of the more rigorous of the AP Science courses. And so it adds that level of rigor, it adds that level of additional STEM development within your academic profile. So just something to keep in mind there, although chemistry doesn't exactly fit into computer science and engineering in the same way as like an AP Physics C would, it is good to show that general rigor, that general taking on challenging courses. So something to think about there. Other options that are good for an engineering and computer science major are AP Computer Science Principles, APCSP, APCSA. And then the other thing is APs in other areas are also helpful for increased rigor. So, what we want to communicate to admissions through your transcript, through your academic profile, is that you're capable of taking on a difficult course load and being successful because they're looking at your course schedule, your everything like that to make sure that you're going to be successful in their program. So, taking on classes like AP Lang, AP Lit, not only going to help your reading comprehension, your writing skills, things like that, but it's also going to show college admissions officers that you can handle courses like that alongside courses like AP Physics C. Um, so that is kind of the engineering computer science general pathway. Obviously, there are going to be nuances to any and all of these, so these are just kind of general cases. The next one is a STEM pathway. And so this is STEM, obviously outside of engineering, but a lot of the time students are taking classes in STEM, majoring in STEM subjects to eventually go into medicine. So that's kind of what is my thought here in this situation. So, STEM is another quite impacted major depending on what specific major in there you choose. Things like biology, things like that are quite impacted, very popular. So, in this situation, math advancement up to at least an AP Calc BC level by senior year is recommended, but higher is never a bad thing. So, aiming at least for that AP Calc BC if possible, and then even going higher if at all possible. The other thing that's important is to max out as much as possible on science courses offered by your school. So the typical track is bio, then chem, or preferably honors bio, honors chem, and then AP chem, AP bio. That's the usual track because a lot of those courses kind of go directly into the different STEM majors, especially those kind of leading into a medical pathway. But adding in other science courses is a good thing too. So if you add in a physics, if you add in an environmental science, those are all good things too. Um, the other thing is career-specific courses. So especially if you are interested in a medical pathway or something like that, and your school offers maybe a kinesiology course or an anatomy course or something like that, those are also good things to have in there just to kind of add to the overall narrative. The next pathway is business. So as you can imagine, business is another very impacted field. Um, and so math advancement, similar to STEM, math advancement up to at least that AP Calc BC level is recommended. And again, higher is never a bad thing. Higher math just kind of helps differentiate you in terms of taking on those more difficult, universally kind of rigorous classes and being successful. Classes like AP Econ, AP Micro, and AP Macro are all good options to load up on as well. And then again, we look at career-focused classes like accounting, finance, things like that, just depending on what specific area of business you're interested in. And I think elective classes and kind of those career-focused classes are also a really good way for you to explore the things that you're interested in and explore the different facets of the kind of overall umbrella subject that you're looking at. Um, so that's business. And then we have humanities. So for here, advancement in English is important. So you want to aim for AP Lang and AP Lit during junior and senior years, respectively. Math rigor is still going to be important as it helps you to be more competitive, but it's not as vital to get up to those really high math levels like multivariable calculus or anything like that. Classes to look for are AP Psychology, AP Gov, AP US History. Those are all going to be really good additions. Um, and then for here, for humanities, it's also helpful to look for classes that help differentiate your interests. So This could be done at your high school, kind of depending on what kind of classes are offered. But you could also kind of create that narrative if your school allows dual enrollment through dual enrollment classes. So, kind of making sure that everything is in alignment in that way as well. So that those are kind of the overall pathways. What I really want to get into is context. And so this is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, where I can make course recommendations based on best case scenario all day long, but it's important to consider context to give the best advice and to make sure that the student is going to be successful and not get burnt out before they even hit the college campuses. So when I am going through course recommendations, it's important for me to consider the whole picture. So um, I like to ask how a student has done in previous similar subjects. So when making a math recommendation on, should we advance in math over the summer or should we wait until the school year and have the full year to kind of dedicate towards the subject? I like to look at past classes and to see how the student has felt in those, how well they've done, how much it has impacted their other classes and things like that just to really set the student up for the best level of success. So if somebody is really uncomfortable in a pre-calc course, I might not necessarily want them to try to take Calc AB or Calc 1 all in the same summer. Maybe it makes more sense for them to take that foundational class over the school year first and then kind of see how they feel after that. So in that way, consideration of how previous subjects have gone and how time has gone in previous years is going to be important. The next piece is what is your bandwidth like? So when we're looking at a course schedule, we are looking at um, not just one class in isolation, but all of the classes together and what kind of a time commitment that's going to look like with everything else that you have going on. Because remember, academics are only one part of the equation. Activities are also going to be a huge, huge differentiating factor in college admissions. So, what I don't want is for students to try to take on too much in the classroom and not have time for anything else, because that can raise concerns about personal development, personal growth, involvement in outside activities and experience in that way and exploration. So it's important to try to balance out your courses with making sure that you can accomplish the other things that are going to be important. And that kind of leads into the next bullet point is how do activities and extracurriculars play in? So again, activities and extracurriculars are going to be a huge part of the college admissions process. And so when we're looking at kind of the recommended time commitment for state schools and things like that, we're looking 20 to 25 hours a week. For top 20 schools, we're looking for 25 to 30. For Ivy Leagues, we're looking 30 plus. So having that in mind when we're trying to balance out the school schedule and with making sure that you have enough time and bandwidth to show leadership, to show impact in your activities is going to be a really important thing to consider. When we're looking at classes, asking questions like these are going to be important. So, a question, if I took this AP class over the regular one, would I be able to manage at least a B? Because a B in an AP class is going to be preferable than an A in an easier class that didn't challenge you at all. Because the B in an AP class, not only is a B not a bad grade, but also you have the added rigor to your schedule that really kind of starts to communicate the fact that you are A, willing to take on a challenge, and B, capable of handling that challenge successfully. The second question is, would trying to take this class negatively impact my other classes or activities? And so this is something that I talk about a lot with students because sometimes we talk about the fact that, yeah, maybe we'd be able to manage a B, but in managing that B, other classes would kind of fall by the wayside. Activities would have to be put to the side in order to focus all the attention on this one class. So That's not something that we necessarily want to do. So it's all about finding that balance. A couple of things that I hear a lot of the time is I don't want to take that class because that teacher is a hard grader, or I don't want to take that class because it's a lot of work. These reasons, in and of themselves, are not reasons to forego a class. Um, if they're paired with something else, then we can talk about it. But just because a teacher is maybe a hard grader or because a class is a lot of work, that's not a good reason to not take a class. And the reason is that that's what college is going to be like. And you can't get to college with an engineering major and find out that the teacher that you have for your engineering 101 class is a really hard grader and then decide that you don't want it anymore. So so it's all about kind of finding that context, finding that balance, and making sure that you're taking on challenges that are appropriate for what you're going for. Okay. My other thing is aim for progression and balance, not perfection. So that's what we were talking about a little bit with the B in an AP class is preferable to an A in a class that doesn't challenge you. Because when college admissions officers are looking at your transcripts, they're not looking at you to be perfect. They are looking at you to make sure that you are capable of handling a college course load, along with a variety of activities that really speak to what you're interested in, who you are. So, again, classes are not about perfection, it's about positive progression and balance. And this is kind of what the 4 years look like in that scope. So, freshman year, and I've heard a few people say this in the last month, asking whether or not colleges look at freshman year in order to make their admissions decisions. And yes, colleges still see this, it's still part of the overall narrative. So, freshman year is really a time to start building a foundation and exploring what you're interested in. So, this is a time to really get used to the high school environment, to start becoming familiar with the activities that are available to you, to familiarize yourself with your school's policies, things like that, and to really start exploring what subjects you might love and what things that you might be interested in pursuing further. Sophomore year is when we start to add in a little bit more rigor and see what happens. So that's the year about kind of getting your footholds, finding your academic strengths, and really starting to hone in on what you like and what you don't like. Um, Junior year is going to be the most important year because as you're applying for college, this is going to be the last full year that admissions officers have access to really make a judgment on your ability to be successful in high level courses. So this is the year that we really want to go full speed ahead with the rigor and make sure that your classes are in alignment with what you hope to do after high school. Um, Senior year is the time to keep up momentum. And a lot of people think like, oh, colleges aren't going to see on my applications the classes that I took in senior year, so I can take my foot off the gas a little bit, and that is not the case. So your senior year classes will go on your applications. Even if you don't have the grades for them yet, they'll be something that you put on there as planned or in progress. And then if you apply regular decision to a lot of schools, they might also have access to your mid-year grades for senior year. So senior year is a time to maintain momentum, to stay consistent, and to make sure that you are continuing to challenge yourself. Um, so over these 4 years, it's a time to really build your narrative, to build on your progress, to find your strengths, to explore what you're interested in, and really hone in on that. Now, we have about 15 minutes for questions. And I know that I answered a few in the beginning. So let's scroll up here. Perfect. And it looks like my wonderful, fantastic moderator has been copying the questions. So let's see here. So we're going to paste them in the chat. So is AP considered more or less rigorous than equivalent CC classes. So about the same. So both the AP classes and CC classes are seen as college level classes. So they're seen as about the same. So you can't really go wrong either way. How do you calculate UC GPA? So that's something that we will, if you want that resource, we can send that out. There's a lot of different things that go into it, but again, at the end of the day, it is not that important. So I would not recommend spending a lot of time worrying about the UC GPA. Um, for the extracurricular hours needed, so for state schools, we're aiming for anywhere from 20 to 25. For top 20 schools, we are looking anywhere from 25 to 30. For Ivy League schools, we're looking for 30 plus. So, and within those, we really want to make sure that the hours are being dedicated toward things that you are deeply committed to and able to make significant impact in. I'd much rather see you have, you know, 6 or 7 activities that take up 30 hours that you're deeply involved in than to see you take on, 30 activities that you only go to a 1 hour meeting per week. Does doing an internship add any weightage to college applications? It can. And so I would ask you, and with any extracurricular activity, I would ask you if you weren't allowed to put an experience on your college application, is it still something that you'd want to do? And if the answer is no, then I would say, let's forego. If the answer is yes, I would want to explore why that answer is yes, why you really want to go for it, and why it's important to you. And then we kind of start to discover what your priorities are and how we can position it in terms of the college application without it just being another thing on your activities list that, you were part of this organization and it happened and that's great. But we really want it to go further than that. Next question. Do you recommend to do a dual enrollment from community college or UC Scout? Either one is fine, depending on what you're looking for. So, if your school is one of those that doesn't approve dual enrollment classes, obviously UC Scout is going to be a great option. But like I said, it depends on the course that you're looking for. It depends on kind of what your goal is through taking a course outside of your high school. The second part of the question is which counts for GPA. Depends on your school's policy. So if your school will put classes from outside organizations on your transcript, sometimes it counts toward your GPA, sometimes it's just on there. So that would be a question for your counselor, just to kind of make sure that you understand what that policy is like. Um, as school policies change all the time, will colleges consider the policy that was in place when the student entered ninth grade or whatever the policy is when they apply for college? My son's school didn't allow AP courses in ninth grade when he was a ninth grader and then changed that policy later. Um, no, I don't think you're at a disadvantage at all. That might be something like how we talked about, you can put things in the additional information section. So that might be something that you put in there just to kind of give a little bit of an additional explanation. And then that kind of it adds that level of understanding to your application, but it also adds a level of peace of mind for you too, just to make sure that like they're in the loop with everything that's going on. They kind of understand the context. Courses to take summer. What course you can take during summer for STEM? Is it weekly? So I don't know if I fully understand the question, but courses for STEM, I mean, it can look like a variety of things. So if you're able to get ahead in your math courses over the summer, and that's something that you need to do kind of depending on your progression, that would be a great option. But you can also look into, especially if it's your first kind of foray into the community college system, you could also look into those behavioral sciences and humanities courses and kind of tailor those to what you're interested in. So kind of like what I was talking about earlier, you could look at if you're interested in going into medicine, you could look at a biological anthropology class or like that osteological anthropology class about the study of human bones. So just kind of looking at the course catalog, seeing what's in there and seeing what you might be interested in. Um, if a student only has time for either a summer course or a volunteer opportunity, which one should they prioritize? So something that I like to do with students in exercise is to go through and list all of the different things that they're doing over the summer. and kind of calculate the dedicated hours on average per activity. And so by understanding the average weekly hours per activity, we kind of start to better understand what time is going to look like in the grand scheme of the full hours in the summer. Because summer is a time when, it's important to stay on the game and it's important to get ahead if at all possible, but it's also important to kind of take a break and to recharge before the school year starts. So my recommendation for your student would be to kind of take stock of everything that they're doing over the summer and really try to understand what those commitments look like. And then at the end of that, kind of decide if the summer course or the volunteer opportunity is going to be something that is more meaningful and kind of like the overall development. Um, and I know that's not an exact answer, but it varies from student to student, kind of depending on what your goals are. So I would say for sure to do the inventory of summer activities and then go from there. For AP and IB courses, when students can take them, so that's up to your high school's policies. Like I said, some students are allowed to take them as soon as they get in. Some students have to take kind of a foundational year and start with those honors classes. So it's really up to your school's policies. Um, Next question, does it make sense for kids to take AP or community college classes not related to their major? For example, should an engineering take economics AP classes just to show rigor? So this is a situation where it would be important to know that students' full context because taking AP or community college classes can be an excellent way to add rigor, but you can also take pathway related courses to add that rigor that'll kind of count toward other requirements as well. So there are often like if you're interested in computer science, you can often find like web development, coding classes, and things like that at the local CC. They're also offering, starting, I think, very soon, if not already, the AP system has started to offer classes like AP cybersecurity, which is something that students can take through UC Scout and things like that if that's something they want to add on. So, like I said, completely up to kind of the context of the situation, but those are options. High school does not accept UC Scout courses, so if I do take a UC Scout course, can it be included on my college application as a separate transcript? Yes. So anything that you take at a separate institution that will provide a transcript for the class that you took will be included as a separate institution. So basically, if it's not at your high school, if it's somewhere else, we'll just order the transcripts directly from there to send to the colleges you apply to. So that's not a big deal at all, as long as you're still maintaining all of your graduation requirements at school. Um, Eagle Scout and how much value it has. Again, this is one of those things where it only has as much value as you give to it. So if you're just an Eagle Scouts, just to kind of check a box, it doesn't really have that much value. But if you're an Eagle Scouts because it's something that you really enjoy, because you're passionate about it, because you want to make impact, things like that, that's when it really starts to be a game changer. So I've seen plenty of students have a lot of really, really wonderful college essays, have a lot of wonderful stories of their development, things like that as a result of being in Boy Scouts. But I've also seen students who are just kind of in Boy Scouts because somebody told them that they had to, and that was the end of the conversation. And so when you're participating in extracurricular activities, it's important that you feel passionate or some sort of a draw to that activity because those are the activities that you're really going to work hard to spend time in and to make impact in. And that's the most important thing about activities at the end of the day is commitment and impact. Does 20 to 25 hours per week athletic sports commitment considering meeting extracurricular activities rigor? It could. So in terms of activities, what's going to be really powerful and beneficial is that your activities tell a story about you. And so um, with your activities, it's a good idea to have 4 to 6 activities that are kind of seen as spikes. So we would really want to see at least a couple of activities dedicated toward the student's desired major pathway, just so that it shows that extra piece of exploration, that extra piece of dedication, passion, that sort of a thing. So sports definitely count toward the total hours if you want to go based on the hour system, but it's important to have other activities in there that really speak to who you are and speak to your interests. For summers, which would you focus on? Academics, extracurriculars, or furthering school leadership? So if at all possible, all three. But the most important thing to remember about summer is that it's all about um, participating in experiences that you find value in. And so um, I always recommend trying to fit in an academic piece in there if at all possible. But if you have a really great opportunity to participate in an activity that's very valuable to you, that you can make impact in, that you can show leadership development in, then that's also a good option. So it kind of just depends on the situation. And I know that that's not a very satisfying answer, but it's all about which one, if the student kind of sits down and really thinks about it, it's all about which one the student thinks that they are going to benefit the most from and that they're going to get the most development from. Um, is it better to fill elective slots with more APs or CC classes if trying to max rigor? Yes and no. So, elective slots are so if you want to fill these with AP classes, that's totally fine. But those elective slots are also great ways to explore your pathway if your school offers relevant classes. So I've seen lots of students who have a medical pathway, and like I said, their school offers an anatomy class or a lab dissection class or something like that. Exploration in that way can be a great way to really solidify what your interests are and add that piece of narrative to your story. So, can it be AP classes? Absolutely. Can it be pathway classes? Absolutely. So, kind of just depends on the overall situation. Do you recommend having a free period in senior year? No. So, free periods are often seen as kind of a blow-off period, and it's also kind of understood as something where it's you're taking your foot off the gas. And so I would recommend if you do have a free period during your senior year, try to fill it with like a CC class or something like that, just so that it's not an empty period. You could also fill it with an elective or a pathway course that has something to do with something that you're interested in. But I would say I would recommend against free periods and also TA periods unless you have something tangible that you can show from the TA experience that's not just the equivalent of a free period. Do you recommend expensive summer programs at UC by third vendors? They cost at least 3,000 for a week. My general recommendation is looking at official college sponsored summer programs because third-party programs, while they do take place on college campuses, you can't really speak to the quality of the instruction because it's not instruction that's coming from that institution. So, um, if you do, if you find a summer program and the reviews are good and you look at the speakers and they have kind of a transparent model and it seems like something that would be a good experience, student is into it, they feel like they're going to get a lot out of it, that could be a good option. But speaking to the quality is a lot easier to do when it's directly sponsored by a school because a lot of the time the facilitators and things like that are going to be professors at the school. Extracurricular activities, weekly or monthly. So those hours are weekly. So the 20, 25, 30, 30 plus, those are weekly. How do college recruiters look at your profile if you get an A in the AP class but don't do well on the AP test for college credit? You are not mandated to report any AP tests that you don't want to. So, if you take an AP class, you do really well. You take the test, you don't do so well, you don't have to report it anywhere. So, that's just kind of the class is the most important part of the equation. The AP test is more just for the college credit piece. If a student has a weighted GPA of 4.76 with high rigor and 1B in math in 10th grade, will it affect their chances for an engineering major? No, a B is still a good grade. We will just try to improve that progression as time goes on. So really pay attention to those math courses in the future and try to improve that as much as possible. But like I said, a B is not a bad grade. If it was a C, I'd be more worried. If you failed, I'd be super worried. A B is fine. A B is not going to make or break your chances for UCLA, UC Berkeley. And I know that we are out of time and we still have quite a few messages in here with questions. So I will ask my lovely moderator here what the kind of procedure is for for overflow. Okay, perfect. We do have to wrap it up. So please direct questions. So on the Eagle Lock Nest portal, there is a community forum. So feel free to go in there, ask questions there, and coaches will be able to respond. We do get a notification when a post is made in the community channels. So absolutely ask your questions there. It has been so wonderful spending time with you today. Like I said, I'm always grateful for experiences like these when I get to work with students and to help with the educational narrative. So have a wonderful evening, and I will see you on the Eagle Lock Nest to help answer your questions. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.